Good morning, YouTube. This is Leo, and this is my new series, What's This Wednesday? And this is my Fluke multimeter. I'm going to spend a few minutes picking out a random thing from my shop and talking about how it is useful to me and how it might be useful for you if you're doing music DIY projects. And so this week I've got my trusty multimeter here. This is a really good one. It's made by Fluke. It's the 87V, and I love it. Let's talk about what it does. So I think a multimeter is the most useful thing you can have in your shop. After your soldering iron, it's probably the second thing that you're going to buy to do music or any kind of DIY work. And you can use it to troubleshoot all kinds of problems. So it's a very useful tool. If you've never seen one of these before, basically the way it works is you plug in your probes here, and you've got a red one and a black one. Black one goes to ground, red one goes to whatever it is you're trying to measure. And this thing meters or measures the differential between these two things, okay? You select what you want it to do with this big center dial. So if you want to measure voltage, say, you can set it here. There's two voltage modes, and it will measure the voltage of whatever is between these two things. So let's have an example here. Let's say we've got a module that I just finished building. It's the 4MS shuffling clock multiplier, and I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. And let's flip this guy over. And I know that these pins here are ground, so I'm going to go ahead and use the black probe to touch the ground pins. And this side is the -12 side. So as soon as I touch that, we should see -12 or -12.03 on the multimeter. Close enough. And this side should be the +12 side. So let's see if that measures out. +12.00. So we've just measured the input and verified that the unit is getting power and that power is coming in. Okay, you can measure other things too. So we have a voltage regulator here, and the tab here is usually or always grounded. So you can touch this and then measure the incoming voltage. This should be around 12-ish, 11.24, close enough. And the output side should be, this is a 5-volt regulator, so the output should be about 5 volts. And if we touch that, we see that it is 4.989 volts. So that is just fine, that's within spec. And I know for a fact that this microprocessor receives power on pin 1. So if we wanted to make sure that, let's say the lights weren't coming on and we wanted to troubleshoot what's going on, what we could do is check to see if the microprocessor is actually getting power. And you can do that by holding the ground on the ground and carefully touch pin 1 so you don't short anything else. And we see that the 5 volts coming out of the voltage regulator is being delivered to the microprocessor. So we just use this thing to verify that power is coming in, it's being regulated, and it's being sent to the microprocessor. So this is one way you can test and check things, just to make sure that your power is going where it needs to go. If you see some really wonky number coming out of the regulator, well, maybe your regulator is broken and it needs to be replaced. Or if the power isn't getting to the processor, maybe you need to check your soldering work and make sure that everything is soldered on the back. You know, maybe you missed a pin here on the back, and that's why the device isn't working. So, very useful troubleshooting tool. You can do a lot of other things too, right? Like you can check continuity, which is something I find myself doing a lot. Let's say you have an input that's not working and you want to double check that your cable is good, right? You want to make sure that the cable hasn't gone bad. But what you can do is put on this nice attachment, clamp one side like that, hit that so it beeps. And so now you've confirmed that the sleeve of this cable is connected to the sleeve of this cable. If you touch the tip, you shouldn't hear anything, and you don't. And that's a good thing. That means that there's no short between the sleeve and the tip. You can check the tip like that, touch the tip and you hear a beep. If you touch the sleeve, you hear no beep. So you've confirmed that this cable is good. There's plenty of other use cases too. This one happens to have a diode checking function. So if you have an LED These only work if you install them in the right orientation. And let's say you accidentally clipped the LED and the legs are both exactly the same length. Well, that's a problem because now you don't know which way you should plug this LED in. But if you have a tester like this, it's actually very easy. You can just clip one side on and we see that we have a light. Since it lights up, we know that it works, and we also know that this leg is the negative leg. If you clip this on the other way around, we won't get any light because it's a diode. The current only flows one way. And finally, let's say you have a box of resistors and you have no idea what these values are. What you could do is actually try reading every one of these color bands, and it is a way of figuring out what value these resistors are, but this is a pain. For me, I think these colors are a terrible system. They're hard to see. It's often very difficult to differentiate between similar colors like red and brown. So I'm not a big fan of reading the color, but if you have a multimeter, all you got to do is put it in this mode with the ohm symbol and touch the two sides, and you see that it says 50.05 K. All right. And this one is 51 and 51 and 50.87. So I would say that this is around 51 K. And if you look here, it says 51K. Now, if this were not on here and you had no way of knowing what these are, you'd either have to read the color bands or you could use your trusty multimeter and figure out what these are that way. Okay? So it's a really useful tool. It's extremely useful when you're trying to troubleshoot problems and figure out why your circuit isn't working or behaving the way that you expect it to. And really, I'm convinced that this is the second most important thing that any DIYer should have after a soldering iron, because if you're having problems, this is often the first and only thing that I need to figure out what the problem is and to resolve the issue. You don't need to spend that much if you want a decent multimeter. I think anywhere between 80 and 100 bucks will buy you a perfectly good multimeter that you can use for a long, long time. And it will have many of these functions. This one's a very nice one. It's quite a bit more, and it's got a lot of bells and whistles. But if you're just getting into this and you don't want to spend a lot of money, I'd say 80 to 100 bucks will get you a good one. So that's it. If you're an engineer, if you're an experienced DIYer, let me know. How do you use your multimeter? Do you have any special cases? Do you have any interesting things that you do? If you've solved any interesting problems with it, leave a comment below and let's have a discussion. Let's share what we know. I hope you've gotten something out of this. Thanks for watching.